Hey guys, you're listening to episode 112 of the Finish Line podcast, where we discuss the intersection of faith, generosity, and personal finance. My name is Cody, and I'm here with my co-host and brother, Keelan. Today we're talking to Whitney Goin. Whitney grew up surrounded by generosity, but after the loss of her father, she realized she had to find her own path. After accidentally finding community with a collection of generous women, Whitney found renewed purpose and excitement in her giving, especially in its capacity to bring people together. Stay tuned to hear her amazing story. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you guys that everything we do here on the Finish Line podcast is 100% free and always will be. If you're getting a lot out of this podcast and want to help others hear the message, the best thing you can do right now is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when new episodes come out. With that, let's get started. Well, we are fortunate to have Julie Wilson joining us again as a co-host from Women Doing Well to interview Whitney Goin. Whitney, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to be with us.
I'm so glad to be with you all. This is a privilege and a pleasure.
Whitney, can you share a little bit about your upbringing and your spiritual background?
I would love to. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, born and raised. My dad was also born and raised in Orlando, Florida. So that led to a lot of great childhood connections and families that we got to be a part of their lives. And my cousins, it was just, to me, often when I say Orlando, people have the wrong understanding of what it is. And to me, there's such history and so many amazing roots. So very proud of this beautiful city. I grew up in a church, First Presbyterian Church downtown. And my parents started going there right when they were married and moved to Orlando. Well, my mom, she grew up in St. Pete. I can't tell my history without talking about my parents because their history is so much of my history, you know, and grew up and was raised on one street, moved down the street when I think I was in fourth grade to another house on the same street because of these generations of families that were there, the Hardys, the Fletchers, all these amazing people. And the church I grew up in was just wonderful. Like, I don't know a day without hearing about the Lord. And that is such a blessing. But I can also reflect back on when I started claiming it for my own. You know, I remember my first Bible, and when I was baptized, I also remember, gosh, I don't know why this is coming to my mind. Warned you, I'll jump sometimes. I took from my Sunday school class a little piece of that putty that you hang posters up with. I remember I was playing with it and I put it in my pocket. When I got home, I felt horrible. It makes me feel horrible right now. I stole from the Sunday school class. I remember that so well and how it felt. Oh my goodness. But I went to high school in Orlando and graduated, went to Florida State, graduated from there, came back to Orlando and have been here with a little stint in North Carolina. Well, like a year in North Carolina, been here ever since. And again, it has proven to be the foundation for how I grew spiritually, the foundation for how I grew as a giver and in generosity, and just the relationships are crucial and so precious to me.
Whitney, I know generosity is an important part of your life now. I'd love to hear where kind of in some of this timeline, God started to plant some early seeds of generosity in your life, maybe some of your earliest memories.
I love that because it's so clear to me. And I think it stands out because the way my father gave and my mother gave and the way the families that I still in close contact and community with gave was so relational. So it all had to do with face-to-face and hands-on giving early on. And I just remember adopting families at Christmas time. That is my first vivid memory of being present, thinking, oh goodness, this feels like something sparking in my heart that I'm sitting here with someone I don't know and they're receiving from us and we chose gifts for them and now they're opening them and they're seeing them and their eyes are lighting up. And knowing that there was something I could have picked out that brought so much joy to someone. I know it's just a story that so many people live out, but I can remember the couch I was sitting on in this family's home. And I remember my dad telling funny stories and jokes and just thinking, this feels like what I think heaven must feel like, and just bringing joy to people and being compelled to select things that really made someone feel known that I never knew. That's my first memory. And then truly, the families I grew up with were all extremely generous and continue to be within the Orlando community. There's even a foundation that we all give to that then we can get money out locally to things that we're all a part of together. And I just never lived without seeing it. I don't recall ever not knowing that that's important or that you would ever walk through life without considering your neighbor or the person you pass on the street or the community you live in. And as I mentioned earlier, my dad was my number one example of that. And he lived so wide open and gave so fully of his finances, of all his resources, his gifts, his talents, that there wasn't a place we could step that we weren't approached by someone who had been touched by him. And just knowing that one man could have that impact on so many. And I have to say, because as I was thinking through generosity, all of a sudden, something that I had never considered as part of his giving was that I talked about with you guys earlier, that the beginning of the Orlando Magic in Orlando. And I always, as a young adult and in high school when it all began, thought of that as him being a good businessman and him caring about Orlando and the future of Orlando. And now that he's gone and I can reflect back over it so wholeheartedly and with a clear vision and understanding of it all, I see how generous he was with his finances, his time, his energy. He gave everything he had. And now to see the joy it brings the whole community, and the way that it has now served the community, he did not gain anything from that for himself other than knowing that he brought something to the city that he loves so much and grew up in that is now bringing others and families so much joy and happiness. So the generosity was abounding. There's no way I could ever keep up with him, but I sure love knowing that he was here and that I got to learn from him.
Maybe tell him a little bit about after he passed away, Whitney. You kind of had a journey to honor his life. Tell him a little bit about that.
I sure did. He had Alzheimer's and also a frontal temporal lobe disorder. So now we know was deteriorating far before we even realized. And because he was so brilliant and so gregarious and childlike, so childlike. So he was in a memory care center when COVID came, and we had not really been able to go and see him for a year. And then he contracted COVID. And I see it as a mercy that eventually took him because the Alzheimer's was really difficult for him. But after that, because it's still during COVID, and his service was at Presbyterian Church downtown where I grew up. But it was when people were still wearing masks and they had to social distance. So we had to completely limit the amount of people there. They had to make a reservation online. And so that the faces out there that I did see, it was just precious, but not everyone could attend. And it was hard. It was just hard because you're not there just to be in the room. You're there to be with the people who loved him and knew him and share in that grief together and share in that joy and celebration together. So it was difficult. And I think I just felt unfinished, and his legacy is so profound, but I just wanted a way to honor him in a way that I know he'd say, "Oh, Whit, that's the best, hon. That's just the best." And he loved Chardonnay. And I was wanting to create a Chardonnay, and he called everyone Bubba. If you ever want to look it up, on opening night of the first Magic game, everyone had a mask of his face. He didn't know it was happening, but I can't remember how many of the first arena sat, had a picture of his face and yelled, "Hey, Bubba," because he called everyone Bubba. mostly because he didn't remember names well. He had a lot of other gifts, though. So many other gifts. And I just wanted to create a wine and call it the Bubs, because his grandchildren call him the Bubs, and just talk about how effervescent it is and how, full of flavor and it's full and it's fruity and it's all these things that he was just so full. And I was telling my friend Leanne Horton about this at dinner one night, that I really had a dream of creating a wine. And she said, well, oh my goodness, in a month, I'm heading out to Santa Barbara to visit a female-owned vineyard and to go tour this vineyard and be a part of this group and meet this woman. And do you want to come? And I was going through a really difficult time with a divorce, right when my father had Alzheimer's. And now I know that it was all very important that happened all at the same time. And what God was doing in my life at the time was very difficult. So that's a whole different podcast of relationships and all that stuff. So, but I was in a season of yes, I need new. God's making all things new. Yes. So Leanne said, great, you got to go. Let's get you a ticket. And, let me just let them know you're coming. So like the next day I have a text from her. Okay, so it ends up, it's kind of a patron event, and you're not a patron, but it's Julie Wilson said that it's okay if you come possibly. She would just like to have a little Zoom call with you and kind of catch you up to speed on what we're doing and why we're going. I'm like, yes. So I get on the Zoom with Julie and Leanne, and Julie's telling me about women doing well. And she's explaining the mission and the purpose. And I'm just listening and thinking, well, all the better. My goodness. Of course, my dad would lead me to a group of women speaking and living out generosity. Of course, he would lead me there with a Chardonnay. Of course, he would do that. Of course, God would allow that. But in a beautiful plot twist, Julie says, you're going to be hearing some terms and things that we do in Women Doing Well. For instance, we all discover our 2-word purpose statement. And I said, I have a 2-word purpose statement. And I'm sure the time Julie was like, okay, what's this going to be? Like, eat ice cream? Like, it's probably a different realm of purpose statements. And she's like, oh, really? What is it? And I said, light freedom. And she's like, well, where did this happen? I said, I was at like a prototype meeting through generous giving that was forming something new. And she's like, that was Women Doing Well. And I'm like,
wow.
So funny.
So I got the thumbs up, and the Bubs wine led me to Santa Barbara. I like telling this story because Leanne, my dear friend, is the most organized, efficient, A personality, wonderful woman. And she said, okay, well, get your ticket. She goes, I'm flying into San Diego, I'm like, okay. So I buy a ticket into San Diego. And meanwhile, because I've been researching wines and I already know about, Napa and all of that, I'm like, San Diego, like what vineyard are we going to in San Diego? So I look up the vineyard and it's up near Santa Barbara. So I called Leanne. I said, Leanne, San Diego to Santa Barbara is going to be quite a drive. And we get in late that night. She's like, what do you mean it's quite a drive? It's right there. That's where the event is. I said, well, the event's Santa Barbara. And she's like, oh, San Diego, Santa Barbara. She had no idea. So I got to claim a smart, wise move of Leanne in the process. That was generous of the Lord to allow that to be, because always trying to keep up with Leanne. And so we switched our flights and I saved her on that one. And the rest with my journey with Women Doing Well, that's where it started, and me trying to honor my father. And in the end, I did, because he would find no better way to be honored than by me furthering my journey of generosity, like he always did.
Whitney, something I love about the story that you're telling is you're so quick to identify these amazing traits in your family and in your father specifically, especially around generosity, the impact that he had on all of those close to him, but also on a community, on a city. And
Mm.
the way that you demonstrated generosity by fully knowing the way to honor him, by knowing exactly what it was, I think there's a real lesson in there about understanding what impact looks like, understanding what generosity actually looks like. And you absolutely inherited that from him and are walking that out. And I can see the joy that it brings you in your face. It's just beautiful to see. I'd love to hear, as you go to this event, as you get reconnected with women doing well, where do things go from there?
Oh, unbelievable. And thank you for saying all that you just did. That means so much to my heart. So thank you for that. So from there, I went to the event and it was beautiful. It was in Santa Barbara. And I'm like, well, I get clothes to go to California and I'm going to just go all in on this. And these poor women didn't know it was coming, because when I said I was still very raw, like it was all so raw. I'm crying on people's shoulders that I've never met, and the generosity that they offered me, the fact that I needed to be somewhere with a group of like-minded women. Look at me talking about what it did for me. Selfish, different from my journey of generosity. But seriously, I am blown away by God's provision on this trip. Going in, I had no idea other than, yay, I have a 2-word purpose statement. I'm good. I had no idea what to expect, and that I was going to go to a vineyard and find out how to make the bubs. But I was welcomed with open arms. And I know I've shared this before because this blows my mind, that I was immediately met with my inadequacies, the way Satan would want me to be met with them. That is, oh, look what they're doing. That's huge what they're doing. Oh, listen to that story. Now that is quite a story. And I'm sitting there like, I'm getting divorced and I want to make a wine for my dad. And, that's why I'm here. And I was so quickly transported as soon as I prayed, Lord, take this from me. Like, Satan, you cannot have a foothold here. God has brought me here and I am not going to be ashamed. And from then on, the tears started, people hugging me drinking Chardonnay, me talking about, what was going to be next and not knowing. And again, another podcast. But at this point, you know how people talk about the dark night of the soul or the existential dread. I, in the middle of the night for about a year now, had been having that, where I'd wake up like, because everything I knew to be true just stopped, or not everything, but what I thought my life was just turned on a dime. And all I could see was a black wall. I couldn't see what was ahead. And I tell you what, I learned to embrace that, because I realized it was not dread. It was not darkness. It was the Lord keeping me from things that he didn't want me to know yet. It was the Lord waiting to pour light upon the steps in front of me in his time. So I got to where I would wake up in the night going, all right, I see nothing, but God, you do. And on the trip to Santa Barbara, I woke up in the middle of the night one night and I literally saw light. Like, I saw light and I didn't see anything else but light. And I knew that God had something new for me. And I had prayed that, please make all things new. And it was in this beautiful hotel room in Santa Barbara with all these women that I didn't know except for one, that a light came in that night of existential dread that made me see more clearly how God was waiting on the other side of that, but only in his time. And this was a door he was starting to swing open wide. New friendships, new community. And isn't it beautiful how he does that? He does not ask us to give of ourselves until he fills us to overflowing with what he's going to ask us to give. So he was bringing me up to a place of filling me up in new ways, all those spaces that had emptied out, all the cracks. He was now bringing the light in, so that as he started putting other steps before me, I had more to give in the way that he created me, not the way I had learned and thought I should give and was comparing and contrasting, and the way he uniquely made me. At the end of that weekend, I realized every woman there where I walked in the room thinking they were all alike and I was set apart in an odd way, not in a beautiful way. I realized they were all set apart, and each of their unique journeys was just for them. There never a need to compare and say, oh, but if I did it that way, oh, but if I did it that way, oh, I should join that movement or that effort because I have nothing special like they do. And it was there that I started realizing just how unique and special and diverse we all are, not only with how we give and where we give, but in the way we were created uniquely to give, how just at a cellular level, how different it is, and how caught we can get in Satan's web of thinking we must be wrong. I mean, he just thwarts us that way, and I was set free from that on my journey through Women Doing Well and doing the pathway and utilizing my 2-word purpose, which now I can have it as a litmus test because there's so many things that God is not compelling me to do. And that is the prayer I pray daily, just to either compel me or constrain me, Lord, based on your will, not my own. And so many things he was constraining me by, but they are, that's a worthier cause, to where I started feeling the constraint so that he could continue to fill me. So when the right things came, the compelling was so clear, the Spirit's voice was so clear that I had to leap forward, and not with, okay. It was pure delight and joy in the leaping. And that the pathway, it gives you a courage for that. It gives you ownership and permission for that. And I realized I had lived a life of needing permission to be me in that way. And I forget that. I don't want to be asking permission anymore except to you, Lord, So I'm thankful that Women Doing Well through the pathway, I learned how to look for permission only from him on who I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to give of my time and talents and resources.
Well, what makes me think of, Whitney, is you're an actress, like you have legit acting jobs, and a friend of yours who also went through the pathway is an actress. And what I'm most captured by is how alive both of you are and how you said no to me. It's hard to say no to me. And you gave me a no, and I said, all right, I'm celebrating your no because I'm really seeing that God's in this. So tell them about the project you're working on.
But Julie, you accepting our no, I know we were so afraid to tell you, not because she's difficult to talk to, but just because I know what she's doing is so profound. So to not be able to be a part of an element of it feels like detrimental, and not wanting to let you down, but also not wanting to miss out because we've gained so much life. But as I told Julie, she worked herself out of a job on that one because we have gained such freedom. And my friend Stephanie, who's part of this farm with me, and we owned a theater company together years ago in Orlando. And we've just been on this beautiful journey of wanting to tell stories, but also wanting to serve people in this industry and community in a way that's meaningful and honest and true and encouraging. But her 2-word purpose is bring hope. I think it's bring hope. So I brought her into Women Doing Well and sent her off to Telluride to her first event. I couldn't go because I was working, but she such a similar experience as me. And we have always just prayed over what's next with our love for this industry, outside of film and television, our initial love for theater in this community we live in. So our theater company started in 2002, and the first show we did was called The Guys, and it was a true story about a fire captain from 9/11 who lost 8 of his men the year before, and he was having the hardest time. He had to write all 8 eulogies. So he was at Ground Zero one day, and a relief worker, he was explaining how difficult it was going to be to write these 8 eulogies. And she said, well, my sister-in-law is a journalism professor at NYU, and she's looking for a way to help. Maybe she could help you. So he said yes. And the play, The Guys, is the hour-long play of them meeting and him telling the story of his 8 guys And so she could help him write the eulogy. It's beautiful. And at the time, before we produced it in 2002, it had been done as stage readings with well-known actors to raise money for different causes. And we were the first group to do a full production of it, full stage production. And so Ann Nelson, the playwright, came down and spent the week with us. And we just had the most unbelievable time, because if you didn't know anyone who was affected personally on site, or if you weren't the second level or third level out, this draws you into these stories and not only provides a footing, but this hope. It's just a beautiful play. And the firehouse that it was written about, they remained anonymous so that no one would come and seek them out. And a year later, Stephanie and I were in New York, and we were in Soho, and a big rainstorm came, and there was a fire engine down at the end of the street. And the gentleman in there said, "Girls, do you need to get out of the rain? You're welcome to jump in here." And we sat with this sweet gentleman, and we were just talking about our story of the guys that we had just produced several months before. And it was his firehouse.
Wow.
So how precious of the Lord to give us that. Because I will say, Stephanie and I both get very emotionally invested in things and relationships. So although we didn't know who these people were, we felt like we were part of them, or they were part of us. So when he said, "Would you like to come to the station and see their lockers and what their kids have done there?" And we went, and it was so profound. So we've always, and we did it another time in 2003, and we've always wanted to revisit it and raise funds for the first responders who are now dealing with illnesses from working on the site. So the first responders who are still victimized at this point and with PTSD and all the things. So we are putting that play up in this September. And it's a funny story, but God being generous, we called on someone. We were like, how do we get this started? A theater in Mount Dora, Florida, that's a fantastic theater. We had both worked with the artistic director there before. So we called her and said, "This is our idea. We want to start doing this and raising money and awareness for these ongoing victims." And she said, "Well, I think we could do it in September." Their schedule's very well set, because we're doing another show that's set in a New York apartment. You could do it on the off nights. And I would love to do that if you two will take the leading roles in the female version of The Odd Couple during the other times. We're like, okay. So it's really hard, because my brain, I don't know if it has room for both, but we open in 2 weeks. So we're getting there. But the response, once she started putting out the press releases, the letters that have come in to her theater alone, and she's kind of in this little deprivation tank out there of just theater all day, every day. She does it all. So for her to realize that patrons who are receiving her information are survivors of that day, and they are immensely touched that their local theater is putting up this production, 20, however many years later we are now, to keep awareness going. So it's already just bubbling with love and camaraderie and support. So it's exciting.
One of the things I love about everything you just shared is how perfectly that story encapsulates everything about you, all the ways that God has designed you, from your background and your passions, your skills, your community, the people that you know, and things that you're personally connected to. You've talked before about your dad being such a relational giver, and you are clearly such a relational giver as well, in just how many people and how many different layers, a project like this impacts on several different layers. And one of the things that I wanted to come back to is you talked before about the event that Leanne invited you to. And I think we're actually going to get to talk to Leanne in a couple of weeks. So people get to hear the other side of that story.
San Diego story, yeah.
We'll see
Where were you
who really ordered those plane tickets. So I'd love to hear, it sounded like that was a big transition period for you in terms of just how you kind of process through generosity, and specifically how it relates to you and how God has designed you. Maybe you can share a little bit about what kind of generosity looked like before that, and what some of your journey looked like, and then since then, how God has enabled you to really kind of lean into that purpose. And I know you already had a 2-word purpose. You were coming in at the 200 level to women doing well, but clearly he has worked through that to even refine that further.
It's unbelievable. I'm going to say, please God, give me the words, because in my life, it's so boom, boom, and I just don't know the words to say the way my mindset was before to what it is now. And not that before was horribly wrong. And I think a lot of people stay in that place and thrive. But for my personality and the way God gave me, the way I was trying to give and thought was the right way to give was so wrong for me. And I was exhausted. And I think I've said this before that, but you give till it hurts, and it might not be your gift, but you need to let God stretch you in that way. And I'm like, I'm so tired of stretching because I'm not stretching. It's not, I'm not giving, and I'm not learning, and I'm not growing, but that must mean I need to do it more, and I wore myself out. And in the church I was in, it's, again, all people I'd grown up with, and they're all doing it. And, grow where you're planted. So I thought all these little Christianese things would be in my mind. I think, okay, just fight the good fight, stay on course. I was dying inside. And meanwhile, there were other factors at play with a relationship that was so not present for me. And I didn't even see how alone I was. But I gave until I hurt. And I probably took a lot of things from others who would have been good at it along the way, because I thought, oh no, I've got to do that, or I've got to help them with that. And I'm not giving specific examples only because God blessed me and he blessed my efforts. But now that I have moved to this way of giving and seeing my offerings and who I am, and no longer trying to be the good little girl that does it this way. I always thought that my passions and the way I was gifted and the things I loved were cute little side things, that wasn't significant enough or important enough to fit into the world of true loving stewardship and giving, that because I just never experienced it that way other than my father, but I couldn't do what he did. But he, again, was my example of that, because he always gave with such delight. And I just wasn't feeling the delight. But of course, what shame does and what Satan loves to do is then make you think, well, it's because I'm selfish. Do I not like people? Do I not like, volunteering? Like, I must just be a selfish person. But Satan loves that. He loves for us to question our own worth so that he can keep us from being delighted and being exactly who we are. Of course he wants to do that, because then there's no joy in the giving and there's no movement forward and growth in the individual. So after, the before and after would be, now I am on fire with joy. Like it's truly an overflow, rather than me trying to scrap for a little energy to go out and get the craft box ready for Sunday school, 20 Sunday school classes, but somebody else loves to do that. So, and it's not me giving a little check that I don't really feel passionate about because everyone else is telling me I should, or, there's just so many wrong ways that we get caught up in, whether it be pride or shame or just confusion. And I think so much of our Christian journey and our walk with the Lord is having the vulnerability to really get to know ourselves, to let him show us who we are. Stop trying to be who you think you're supposed to be to walk the good walk. Let me show you who you are through the mistakes you make, through the messes you make, through the crazy things that you try in my name or outside of. Let me show you through that. Just be open and vulnerable to that process, so that then you can truly be the light I created you to be, in the hands and feet I created you to be. And so now I'm doing that. And it brings tension because all of a sudden you're saying no to things. And I heard a great analogy the other day is you've moved to a different playground. And that's very childlike and brings awe and wonder to me. I've moved to a different playground and I'm sharing my toys in different places. And it makes some other kids mad, because it doesn't fit the narrative that works best for them. Or it may challenge their way of seeing things. And if that's bringing me such joy and delight, I just think Satan works in so many ways, but I love my new playground because I feel fully myself in it for the first time. And that's embarrassing to say at 54, but I'm so thankful for it. And I wouldn't change a step of my journey because everything I did in my 20s and 30s grew me and let me know people and places and things. It's all beautiful. It's all my journey that God allowed me to go on. But I love where he's letting me be right now. I love this playground. It's just so full of light and clarity. I no longer am confused and overwhelmed and feel less than in my choices. I feel very confident and very excited and very on fire and very useful. And that feels good.
Whitney, there's a few scriptures that come to mind as you're talking. The first is when Jesus says, "My burden is light and my yoke is easy." And it sounds like your burden became light as you found that alignment, as you aligned with God's calling in your life. And the second one, comparison is the thief of joy, even in giving, right? My wife and I walked through this season together at our church where we said yes to everything because we were trying to get deeper. We were trying to grow. And we would see these super volunteers who would just volunteer more than we ever could. And we were just so weighed down and it led to burnout and we were unhappy, but we were like, we don't want to be ungrateful. And it felt very similar to the way that you're describing that season in your life. But the third one would be God loves a cheerful giver. And I think when you are walking in his path, that's where that overflow that you're talking about comes from. He fills your cup and then some. And it's really cool to see that alignment leads to the correction of the comparison, and then the overflow comes. And he has just led you into this very exciting, fun life. But I want to dig into, you said you discovered your two-word purpose. How do you hear from the Spirit? Like, I know this is part of the Women Doing Well pathway, but how do you know, like, what is the actual confirmation that you are walking in your purpose?
Right. I love that question. I feel like it's a daily, beautiful journey. Isn't anything that just keeps us like looking and listening just such an exciting part of the journey? And that's what it is for me. And like I said earlier, I quite literally pray every day, compel me or constrain me according to your will. And so now when he brings something, either truly I'll feel it compelling. And I have learned from a million bad mistakes to really discern his voice over mine. But because of the alignment, it's becoming more clear, and taking my two-word purpose statement, light freedom, that truly is my passion. I look back over years of things I was drawn to or where I'd want to leap, and it was always bringing freedom to somebody or to a dream or, to someone's health or to their goals or just to unlocking who they are. So if I can check in on, is this going to light freedom? And there's so many other beautiful two-word purpose statements that someone else is checking on. So if I can stay there, oh my goodness. And then what he does is he allows you to feel that overflow of giddiness that this isn't my two-word purpose. This is me. This is me lighting freedom. And a big passion of mine is also mental health and the people who are trapped within either just patterns of thinking or, the trauma they've been through that they're held in bondage to or mental illness, whatever it be. And the ways that the Lord has showed me the freedom that comes when you walk someone through a journey towards mental health and towards counseling and therapy and freeing themselves from the chains in their mind that ultimately, of course, we know is the Lord setting them free. And for them to then tie that together, that is the ultimate lighting of freedom for me right now. And to be able to anonymously pay for someone's counseling or send someone off to on-site and have them spend a week there. Oh my gosh, because it's individual, it's relational, and minds are being set free from the worldly ties that bind them. And so that's a beautiful one. And it just becomes so clear that for me daily, if something new comes up, now I can also check it to my cup. And in our younger years, you think, oh, I can do that too. Sure, I can do that too. And then you're beat down, exhausted, bitter, frustrated. But now in these years, I can say, oh, I don't have the capacity for that. So my cup's not full for that, and I would have no overflow and it would show up somewhere else. So it doesn't look like lighting freedom, but I'd be open, but no, you can't give what you don't have. So if you don't have the time or the energy or the resources. And for me, I'm a total introvert, Enneagram 4. So my resources, my capacity for a lot of interaction and such can be limited, And I used to despise that about myself. I thought that was such a negative, I even read in a Bible study one time that, I won't say the name of it. It's a long time, but it said, if you're shy or don't feel like going somewhere, you're not trusting God. I'm giving a little paraphrase. And that crushed me. I thought, okay, I'm not trusting him, and it's just amazing the little messages that can get stuck in our mind to then you push yourself to where you're never meant to go. And so now that I can even embrace that I'm introverted and I need to sit home for 3 days after I go do some big thing. And that's okay. I'm not missing God's calling on my life by taking time to let him fill me back up.
You're such a beautiful example of the integration process that brings that biblical cheerfulness, and everything we do is biblical. I think sometimes purpose and knowing your purpose can feel like navel gazing. And there's certainly hundreds of books and tools that you can get your two-word purpose or your purpose statement. That all doesn't matter. It's really that freedom that comes from knowing who you uniquely are and why you're here on planet Earth for the limited years that God has. That dash between the year that you're born and the year that you die, there's only one you. So that dash, that life, however long or short, however introverted or extroverted, no matter what, you have to live your life. And in our original research, only 6% of 7,000 women kind of identified as integrated and giving at that maximum capacity. 6% of 7,000 Christian women. That's what gets me out of bed every day. And you're just such an encouragement today, just hearing, because I don't know if I've heard it in this way, but that is what I'm experiencing and what it's the uniqueness of the work we're doing is it's based on research. But I also think the heritage of your dad and the generous people all over Orlando that I know, it's a community. It's a community thing. There's an energy that God sparks in different ones, and it builds such a beautiful thing, but you're one part and you're doing your part. And that's what I celebrate.
Thank you. And I love that about women doing well and that's what I saw that first time was the integration of these different women. And they were so different from me. And they weren't asking me to join them in their efforts. They were saying, what's yours going to be? What's yours? And I love too that God allows us as he integrates us by truly being who we are, that he shows us our circle of influence. And with me, he says, I don't need you to go this far. Stay right here. This is the influence I want you to have right here to do it well and to do it under my will. And then the trickle of that is up to him. His story is big enough. I don't need to be any bigger than the influence he's put right before me.
I love this focus that we've been able to dig into here on integration and individuality or diversity within the body of Christ, and specifically within the area of generosity. And just hearing you share, or both of you share, I was just thinking back to my college days, and probably a lot of people have this experience, but you start out in college and you just like sign up for 100 things. You don't like even know what you're really signing up for. You're like, oh, that's a thing, and there's a space on the list, so I'll sign up. And I remember feeling like very kind of lost and burned out in those early years. And over the course of those 4 years, really started to kind of understand what I actually cared about and stuff. And I wouldn't say I was really fully integrated and understood my purpose and stuff, but there was a process from beginning to end of honing down. And I found it easier and easier to like cut things out. And this is not really what I need to be doing right now. Could I do it? Sure. But it's just really not aligned with where I'm trying to go and how I'm designed. Other people are perfectly designed for that. And that's great. And I think that this has just been like a really good affirmation of that. And honestly, going back over the whole course of this podcast, when we started out, I was still learning a lot about generosity. And I think I would have said then a lot more that there is kind of a right path and we're all somewhere on the path going up or down the mountain or whatever. And that's not how it is at all. And we've had the chance to hear from so many different, really passionate givers whose lives look so different. I just think about like the last 4 people we talked to, such different stories and such passionate pursuit of God, relationship with God, and his calling on their lives. The same for everything we've talked about here. And I think that's been the number one thing that I've learned through these 100 and whatever episodes of just hearing story after story is that we are designed differently in a really beautiful way. And God likes to integrate all of us in that way and using us in different ways. All of you have, including you, Cody, have referred to the pathway of women doing well. And I don't think, maybe back in Julie's episode, we got into it some, but I don't think recently we've gotten to kind of dig into what that looks like. And I'd love to hear your perspective, Whitney, on what that process entails and what it was like for you. And then, Julie, I'm sure you probably have some thoughts to pitch in along the way.
Yeah, she'll be able to give you the good info. I'll just tell you how my heart felt during it all. It was beautiful. I was excited, encouraged after the first, when I was in Santa Barbara, to learn more about it and to find out I would hear everyone talking about their group, and I'm like, well, I want a group. Just put me in a group. So eventually I got in a group with Sandy, who was the first person I met in Santa Barbara, and she was leading our group. And it was an amazing microcosm because there were 5 of us from all over the country. I mean, this Women Doing Well brings people together from every corner and every walk in ministry. And so here I am meeting weekly with these 6 women that I would have never met in any other way. And we're sharing our lives together and praying for each other. And meanwhile, we're on this journey together. So I'll let Julie tell that because I'll get it wrong and she'll have to correct me anyway. But we had 6 lessons in 3 different sessions. But it was amazing. And each one helps you dig deeper and deeper into your whys and then propelling you forward into those whys. And then you're also just dialoguing about it with this group. So you're learning about it together and you're seeing everyone get excited together or let go of something together, and I think it's Bob Goff who has Quit It Thursdays. And I just loved that. We didn't learn that there, but I think I brought it up once. I'm like, Bob Goff does it a Quit It Thursday. He's like, done with that. And that gave me permission to say, you know what, that's not where I'm being asked to be anymore, but I'm holding on to it for whatever reason. And we all got to encourage each other through those letting goes, and then through each journey, which Julie, tell them about the different sessions because they're all the names of them and the stories that are put with them. It's so intentional and yet so light and loose. And it's just awesome.
We've had a couple of iterations and the pathway came about during COVID because we had created a 6-hour in-home retreat and we launched it in January of 2020. So we were in trouble in March of 2020 with an in-home retreat. No one knew who we were. So we created, I have a television background. And I knew instantaneously that we had been on Zoom for 5 or 6 years. Like that was our only office anyways. So I was like, no one's going to want to be on Zoom. We got to do a broadcast and we got to figure something else out besides the in-home retreat. And so our program director she asked, can I create something that's 1 hour a week? I said, great. So during COVID, it ended up being 18 weeks because no one had anything to do. As soon as COVID ended, everyone's like, 18 weeks is way too long. So we're really excited over the last couple of years. We've been able to hone in the best of content to 12 sessions. And you experience that with a group, either online or you can do it in person now because we're not in COVID. And the pathway essentially takes you through what the research said. Those 7,000 women with a megaphone very clearly told us what they needed. And we give them that and we see the transformation. And so the 3 main drivers of a woman's generosity are purpose, passion, and having a plan for her generosity. So under purpose, it's that scriptural basis. That's the number one motivator of her generosity, is knowing that it's okay for her to give and that God invites her and shows her that it's all his. The second part is your unique purpose, like that thing that gets you out of bed. And it's a tool that's far beyond your generosity, but it certainly is helpful. Then passion is 2 things. It is what you uniquely care about in this season that aligns with God's heart and your heart, right? So passions are not permanent. They can change, but they are very clear for the season you're in, and you kind of know what you have to give. And then passion's also telling your story, because we believe God is generous, and stories are all throughout the Bible how he teaches. And so we teach women how to tell their stories so that their family can come in alignment and their friends can get involved. And then planning is 2 things. It's having a budget for your giving, not just your living and your retirement. And it's having confidence that as your giving gets bolder, the organizations you're giving to can handle it. So how do I do diligence on the organizations? And that's all we do. That's the pathway. You go through with a group. It's so rich. And then we're done. There's nothing to join. I love saying that because women need something to join. Like nobody needs that, right? But we want to equip her. It's like a boot camp to get her ready for the things that God has for her. And we say you can activate outside of us and we celebrate, or if you really are passionate about women and generosity, come on in and be with us for a season and give your gifts to facilitate or be a patron or all the things. So the pathway is a transformational research-based experience, essentially online or in person, and anyone can do it with us.
Well said.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
Well, Whitney, you shared a couple weeks. You've got the guys coming up again. Very exciting. What are you most excited about when you think about the next 5 to 10 years?
I love that. I am so excited about this place that God has put before me, this farm. I tell you what, early in my marriage, I started praying Psalm 31, 7-9. It says, "You have seen my affliction. You know the anguish of my heart, but you have not handed me over to the enemy. You have set my feet in a spacious place." And God just put that verse on my heart, and I just prayed it all the time for this spacious place in my marriage and in my family and what was ahead of us. And little did I know, he literally had this spacious place that he had waiting for me once I got through some really difficult journeys, that I am blown away by how literal he was with me and what he has offered up. It's just remarkable. And we bought this and started working it and getting the animals here. And it is turning into something that we never could have planned if we wanted to. You know, early on, we did that thing that you do, like, okay, God, you've given this to us. How are we going to use it for your good? And instead of just, sitting back and let it go, we'd be like, should we do this? No. And can I say, you see, that's the one part of the pathway I never mentioned: passion, purpose, plan, because plan is not my strongest suit. I'm like, what's that third one? Oh, yeah. So we started thinking we should plan. And then what I've learned about life out here is that it is a journey of tangents. You set out on your day and all of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, here I come, and then you're chasing down this or that. And it's just a beautiful dichotomy of life out here, of just the needs of the animals and stewarding the land and the gopher turtles, all these things. And I'm reached out to all the time, like, can I come out to your farm? Yes, and someone will come spend a day out here, and all of a sudden you learn what they're going through and why they reach out. People I haven't seen in decades. I just got a call from an old college boyfriend that said, I just saw something about, I don't know if any of you have read A Land Remembered. It's a historical fiction about Florida post-Civil War. It's fantastic if you haven't read it. But Ponce de Leon named Florida La Florida because Valley of Flowers. And then in that book, there's a hotel called La Florida. So we named our farm La Florida. We were shocked that it was available on all the things you need it to be available on. And we are just in awe of the things. Like, we just acquired the 3 last white Angus cattle. There's only like 200 left, and we just acquired the 3 last ones from University of Florida, created them at a farm down south. And now we have them here, and they're so special. And then, but people come, and like this old boyfriend, he has a beautiful family. He's like, my son really wants to ride. Is that something you would do? I'm like, yes, just that now we've created this place that seems to be being sought out to find peace and joy and the healing of horses, not to get into all that science, but it's made by God, this healing effect that horses have if you don't get bucked off, which I have broken a collarbone, a shoulder blade, a vertebrae, but it's all human error, not the horse's fault. So the ways that God has started using this place, I cannot wait to see in 5 years what he has, what he will have brought through here, and what he then establishes. Like, I'm out here so much on Sundays because the horses still need to be cared for on Sundays. So we've been talking about having cowboy church, where we just bring in people, let people from the community come and just worship and pray with them. And so to see just the relationships that start and continue, I'm already in awe of it. And I didn't even have to go exhaust myself looking for it. He just is plopping it right down here on this 40 acres, and it's beautiful.
I have to tell you that my faith journey, Whitney, my sister had this woman call me from Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City. And she's like, oh, I'd meet you at church, but I'm at Beach Church out in the Hamptons all summer. So I'm sorry I can't greet you. I'm like, Beach Church? Like, I want to go to Beach Church. And if I was a cowboy, I'd be like, I want to go to Cowboy Church. That sounds really fun. So good on you. I think that'll be a great thing.
I think it will be too. I do.
Well, Whitney, as we get to the end of the episode here, we like to end every episode with our Manager's Minute, just a practical action our listeners can take to step into their role as stewards and manage God's wealth wisely. So, Whitney, do you have any suggestions for our listeners today?
I think the one that just bubbles up, which I touched on but didn't speak on specifically, which my lack of planning kind of lends to, is spontaneity. Don't be afraid to be spontaneous. Don't be afraid to shake up that plan if God brings something right to you. I know the tyranny of the urgent and turning away from things that are distracting us, but sometimes there's some beautiful spontaneous moment. And Julie's done it on an airplane. I've done it, like handed my jacket to someone who said, I love that jacket. And just, it's yours. I mean, the one thing my dad always said is, none of it's ours, honey. None of it's ours. If he tells me it's that guy's, I better go give it to that guy. So the moments to be spontaneous with whoever needs it in that moment. And of course, there's wisdom involved in that and not allowing for harmful things. But if you're really awake and watching in awe and wonder, the moments of spontaneity that then lead to the further joy and abundance is just a beautiful way to be.
Yeah, I love that. And I think is right on brand with everything else that you have shared so far. Whitney, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, to share your story and all the places that God has taken you. I'm just really grateful for the wisdom and the experience that you shared with us.
Oh, I'm tearing up because I thank you for caring about my story, because I'm just so thankful to God. And again, Lynn's towards where I used to be, that I would think nobody else would find that interesting. So the fact that you are affirming that is huge to me. So thank you. And Julie, mwah.
Thanks so much for listening to the show, guys. If you want to find any of our references or links from today's show, you can always find them in our show notes at finishlinepledge.com/episode 112. Before we finish up, I have a quick question for you. Have you ever stopped to answer the question, how much is enough? A financial finish line is designed to help you do just that. Our 90-day Finish Line Pledge breaks the process down into 3 easy steps. Step 1, define how much is enough for your family to spend in a single month, and use that as your monthly budget for 90 days. Step 2, as God provides money to manage, set aside any margin outside of your finish line into a separate bank account. Step 3, after 90 days, explore the millions of ways you can use that margin you've set aside to create joy, purpose, and impact in God's kingdom. Want to learn more? Check out our website at finishlinepledge.com. That's it for today. We'll see you next time.